All right, so I talked a little bit about my 2023 predictions in the top stocks video, but I wanted to talk a little bit more. I wanted to dive a little deeper and talk about this article that I seen. And then the main point was Tiff Macklem says he won't settle for anything less than 2% inflation. So basically, what they're saying is that yeah, we're going to keep raising rates, or at the very least, we're going to keep rates high until we get down. Um, there's several problems with that. And the most obvious elephant in the room, I think there's two elephants in the room at least, but the most obvious one is the yield curve is pointing towards the fact that they're bluffing, right? And the reason being is that we have massive amounts of inversion, right? I mean, we have, I think the 10-year and the 1 year, I know in the States is inverted, 10-year and the 6 month might even be inverted. Basically every major form of inversion that you can imagine is inverted. So again, the bond yield is pointing towards the fact, or is predicting basically that they are bluffing and that they will stop raising rates sooner rather than later, and most likely even be lowering rates at some point in 2023. Again, a popular term you hear in the investment community is don't fight the Fed, right? But the reality is that they've been wrong a lot. And honestly, that probably is wrong more often than not, right? And a good example of this is this is literally from July of 2020. Interest rates will be low for a long time, right? So this idea that these guys are like that we're out there, you really should be taking them seriously. In my opinion, it's complete BS, right? And the reason being is number one, higher rate, like the government manipulating interest rates, it doesn't have as much an effect on inflation as people think. It just doesn't, right? I mean, and you really need to dig deeper into the data and you'll find that out, right? The other reason being is we've heard them talk a big game in one way or another and it not turn out to be true, right? Like I said, in 2020, they were like, yeah, we're going to be keeping rates low for a long time. And then, you know, 2 years later, not even 2 years later, they start raising rates. Not only that, they raised them very fast, right? So this idea that we should be taking their word to the bank, it's like, I wouldn't do that, right? I wouldn't do that. If I was betting money, I would be betting a lot of money that they would be for sure rates are going to stop going up within the first 6 months of the year. I'd be very surprised if they're still raising rates. In fact, like I would give it like a 95% chance that rates will have stopped going up by the summertime. And I would also be very surprised if rates aren't going down at least by the end of the year, right? Because the bond market is screaming that, right? And the bond market is almost always right. I mean, the bond market, like when you see these inversions, like it's almost as certainly that you're going to see recessions, which will lead to them lowering rates, right? And again, if you get a recession, well, inflation is going to come down naturally, right? So the real question for 2023, in my opinion, is what causes the Fed and the Bank of Canada to stop raising rates and to start lowering rates, right? Is it because they engineered this soft landing that they're talking about? Or is it because they did so much damage that they have to? And I think it's probably going to be the latter. But we don't know, right? Nobody knows that. And again, like obviously everything here, in my opinion, do your own due diligence, blah, 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 blah. But again, the bond market is almost always correct. And the Fed is very often wrong, right? And we've seen it in recent history, right? So that's what I would say. As far as the stock market goes, anything could happen, right? Honestly, anything could happen at this point. Nothing would surprise me. I could see them, stop raising rates as early as February, and not only that, start lowering rates by the summer, and it'd be a mad 20, 30% up here. Or maybe they do stay hawkish for longer than up until the summer or so, and that causes a crash or a deep recession, and we go down another 20%. The more likely scenario, probably we go down another 20%. It's sad to say, but what I think happens is they do some damage. It's not the end of the world. Market probably, we probably see new lows, but that would lead to them stop raising rates, probably start cutting rates, especially by the end of the year, and we close even, maybe slightly up for the year. That's what I would predict, because that's what the bond market is pointing towards, right? And again, the bond market is almost always right. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about here today. But again, one of the big myths that I wanted to continue to point out is the Fed doesn't have as much control as people think. The Bank of Canada doesn't have as much control as people think. The market still has more control over how this stuff works. And eventually, if these inversions stay the way they are, they're going to get their way over, and it's basically the market, right? It's the market saying, yeah, we don't believe you guys when you're saying you're going to continue to stay hawkish. We don't believe you, right? And the longer that happens, the more likely it is to happen, right? I mean, and as far as the stock market goes too, I mean, we've seen record amounts of put buying, right? When it comes to put options, basically people trying to hedge themselves on the downside, basically, not predicting, but in case of a crash that, dampens the blow, right? And they may even make money if we get a crash, right? So in reality, we would need something pretty bad to happen for the stock market to go down significantly, right? I think we very well, we probably do. If I was predicting, I do think we go below 3,500 on the S&P. But again, I think we probably close the year around 4,000 if I was guessing, maybe low 4,000s. I don't see anything significant into the high 4,000s, 5,000s. That's unlikely unless we get a very deep recession. But if we get a very deep recession, then the market's going to go down even more. It's going to be harder to close up. So that's what I wanted to bring up today. But again, I think when people see this, that you really, really need to be careful, because when it comes to the market, one of the biggest driving factors when it comes to the Fed's raising rates is simply the tone and the tenor that they're using, right? The Fed and the Bank of Canada manipulating interest rates doesn't have as much effect as people think, right? It doesn't have as much effect as people think. At the end of the day, the market still has more power, right? And that's something that people really need to realize. And like I said, the market is pointing towards the fact that it's highly likely that they will be not only stop raising rates, but will be cutting rates at some point in 2023. And it's probably going to be sooner rather than later. It's probably going to be in the spring, if not the summer. So anyway, that's what I wanted to bring up today. If you liked the video, hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.